This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. In my last video, which is connected to this one, so if you haven't seen it, please go check it out. But in my last video, I talked about Deshaun Watson and his 2020 season. And if that season was overrated, if that season was overplayed, like if people made too much of a big deal out that season, were those numbers inflated? I really challenged that 2020 season to see if statistically it is the top 5 season that everybody says it was, because again, it's hard for people to get their head around, and it was hard for me to get my head around somebody being a top 5 quarterback and their team having 4 wins. How does that happen? I evaluated how that happened, and to me, those numbers were legit. It was not inflated. If anything, it was underinflated. He should have probably had better numbers than that 2020 season. It was the circumstances there. And if you want to know what those circumstances are, or you want to argue that point, go watch the video where I actually explain why I feel that way with all of those stats, numbers, and things backing up that specific argument. But the reason I wanted to do that was to make the 2020 Deshaun Watson return to form thing tangible. I want to know what a return to form is. In order to understand and grasp what a return to form for Deshaun Watson looks like, you have to understand what the form is. And I felt like there were a lot of people talking about if Deshaun Watson is looking like Deshaun Watson that, quite frankly, did not watch Deshaun Watson before he became a Cleveland Brown. So we're judging what return to form looks like based off of our imagination, more or less. Because it's not like a lot of us went back, watched 2020. You know, it's not like a lot of us were watching the Texans in 2020. The image of Deshaun Watson that a lot of us have is an image that is largely made up of random national TV games and highlights. It's not a real image of what that player was able to do. And when you don't have a real image of what somebody's going to do, it's easy to get carried away. So I wanted to answer that question. What does a return to form for Deshaun Watson, like really understand that 2020 season? Because in this video, I want to apply that to talk about what that 2020 season would look like in 2024. So what does a return to form for Deshaun Watson look like, and who in the NFL right now fits his statistical profile and his perception profile of who he was in 2020. They're going to be 2 different players, but we'll talk about it. Deshaun Watson's 2020 season is statistically very similar to Dak Prescott's 2023 season. And Dak Prescott is an interesting character. I'll talk about Dak a little bit more, but the reason I say this is if you look at PFF grade, QBR, if you look at first downs, big time throw percentage, turnover worthy play percentage, yards, all of these things are very similar to what Deshaun Watson was doing in 2020. And that's why I'm saying statistically, Dak Prescott's 2023 season would be similar to Deshaun Watson's 2020 season. Now, there's a reason why when I say that, it's not going to hit everybody right. The perception of Dak is not that of an elite quarterback, but the numbers from Dak are definitely like in that realm of elite quarterback. It's kind of interesting what Dak Prescott kind of represents. Let's take somebody like Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, since the minute he stepped on a football field, has always been considered as a better option than Dak Prescott, right? Since the second he stepped on the football field. If you compare what Dak Prescott has done since 2020 and what Joe Burrow has done since 2020, Dak has the better numbers in almost every category. In less games, I believe Dak's played 50 games in the last 4 years. Joe Burrow has played 53. How you perceive a quarterback is a very interesting thing to me. Because again, I bring up Dak and Joe Burrow, similar numbers. Dak has better numbers than Joe Burrow over the last 4 years, but you would be hard pressed to find a list, even from people who cover the Cowboys, that would rank Dak Prescott over Joe Burrow. And I believe the main reason for this, and I'm not saying this as like, oh, the only reason. I'm saying this as like a legitimate reason. There's a legitimate reason here, and that legitimate reason is perception. I know a lot of people like to throw away perception as if it's something that's not real. But perception is real, and perception does matter for a quarterback. Perception changes how the people who you play around feel when you're on the field. Perception changes the energy level that people have, the excitement people have to play with you. Like, perception matters. It was a lot easier to find people who wanted to play with Russell Wilson in 2018 than it is right now, because perception matters. Even though Russ put up numbers similar to his 2019 season, the perception of him is of a loser. And that's the issue that Dak has. Dak is perceived not as a loser in the classical sense of somebody who can't win a game, but somebody who can't win in the biggest moments. The reason this perception exists is because Dak's regular season success never matches his postseason success. The better you do in the regular season, the less room for error you get in the postseason. That is the number one constant in all of football sports talk. The better you do in the regular season, the less rope you get in the postseason. Eli Manning has had so many bad postseason games. But because he was never really that good in the regular season, them times where he got eliminated, it never mattered. Because nobody expected him to do anything. If you win 11 games, if you win 12 games, if you win 13 games, and you get eliminated in the second round, not going to hit. People ain't going to respect that. Lamar Jackson is a perfect example of this. People will bring up all the time how Lamar has a similar playoff record to this other quarterback, or that he even has a playoff record that's being used against him. And that is just what perception is, man. When you go 14-2, when you've had the 1 seed 2 times in your career and you've yet to get to a Super Bowl, people gonna look at you funny. Why do people look at Peyton Manning as somebody who was a postseason loser for such a long time? Because Peyton Manning did the same thing. Overperformed in the regular season, underperformed in the postseason. Josh Allen, a great performer in the regular season. Postseason, we'll see what we get. If you put together a great regular season, everybody's going to have a laser focus on you in the postseason. Hell, Brock Purdy put together a great regular season. The second it looked like he might have slipped up, that first half versus the NFC Championship game versus the Lions, everybody was ready to tear them up. When you have great regular season success, people are going to be ruthless about the criticism of your postseason failure. And that is what Dak Prescott has fallen victim to. And it works both ways, because Joe Burrow is a perfect example of the opposite. Nobody really ever expect the Cincinnati Bengals to get to the AFC Conference Championship games. Both times they did it. The first time they did it, it really came out of nowhere. The second time they did it, everybody thought they would lose to Buffalo. They didn't. They got there. So because Joe Burrow has had this success, has gotten to a conference championship, it hits different than when Lamar gets there and loses. Because you didn't expect the Cincinnati Bengals to get there. So our perception is of somebody who is an overachiever. Where when you look at Lamar, you look at him as somebody who's underachieving. The perception matters. And that's why when I bring up that Deshaun Watson's 2020 season is very similar to Dak Prescott's 2023 season, statistically speaking, A lot of y'all gonna have a weird reaction to that. But Dak's 2023 regular season was enough to get him second place MVP votes this year. That's a really good season. So then I have to ask myself this question. If statistically that 2020 season is similar to Dak Prescott, what was Deshaun Watson's perception like? Like, what did people perceive Deshaun Watson? What did Deshaun Watson feel like prior to the trade to the Cleveland Browns? Deshaun Watson's perception is a mess now because his personal life has become such big news that it's impossible for a lot of people to not add that into their perception of him as a football player. But indulge me a bit as I try to look at what his perception was as a football player prior to all of those things breaking. And here's the interesting thing to me. In 2018, in 2019, Deshaun Watson was the original Joe Burrow. Like, how people look at Joe Burrow, how people talk about Joe Burrow, how people get excited about Joe Burrow, how people love Joe Burrow. That is exactly what used to be the case for Deshaun Watson. Down to a T. And the reasons people love Deshaun Watson, same reasons they love Joe Burrow. I mean, here comes somebody who was a national champion in college. Here comes somebody who is known for being insanely clutch in college. Here's somebody who has had some game-winning drives and some spectacular clutch moments. Here's somebody who is seen as that guy with the magic touch. That was Deshaun Watson in 2018 and 2019 and 2020. That's how people looked at him. That 4-12 season did hurt his perception because nobody thought he would have an under 500 season, but we talked about that. But that was the perception of Deshaun Watson. It was very similar to the perception of Joe Burrow. The reason that perception exists was obvious. Both quarterbacks were pretty clutch, right? Joe Burrow in 2021 and 2022, when he made those two big runs, had 9 game-winning drives and 5 fourth-quarter comebacks. Now, I want to be very careful with what I'm doing here and very clear with what I'm doing here. I am not stating these stats to state that one player is more clutch than the other. I just want to state this as a statement of fact that both of these players have statistical evidence of doing things that we in the media widely consider to be clutch. I am not comparing the two at all because I think comparing stats like this and coming out with the conclusion that somebody is more clutch than the other person is very flawed because how you get the chance to have these stats is very random. But 2018 and 2019, Deshaun Watson had 11 game-winning drives, had 9 fourth-quarter comebacks. He was Joe Burrow before Joe Burrow. So back to the reason I'm doing this video and the reason I'm taking that 2020 season and comparing it. I don't want to hear anybody tell me that Deshaun Watson is back to 2020 form unless he is playing at a level where you perceive him as a similar level quarterback as Joe Burrow or better. Because if he puts together a statistical profile that is similar to what Dak did last year, but also has us feeling like he is Joe Burrow in those clutch moments, you have something that is better than Joe Burrow. That is what him being back to 2020 form would look like. And it goes without saying, if he does that, yes, this team is a real dangerous Super Bowl contender. So that is my whole thing about using the term, is he playing 2024? I don't want him to get 20. I don't want him to have a decent game and get a win. And we're like, oh, he's back to 2024. I think that's not real. That is to me what the bar is for him to be back to 2020 form. You have to answer some questions. Is he an MVP candidate? If he's not back to 2020 form. Is he somebody who is being insanely efficient with the football, where Deshaun Watson got 4,800 yards in 2020 with the least offensive snaps in the NFL? Is that something that he is doing something similar to? If he's not, then you can't say it's back to 2020 form. Now, there's a lot of different places Deshaun Watson can exist in where it would be good enough for the Browns to win a Super Bowl. And I want to talk about those spaces because I think there is a larger spectrum here than what most people are giving for what the quarterback play needs to be for the Browns to be in Super Bowl contention. Of course, it would be great if he's better than Joe Burrow and he's playing at that high of a level, and we're talking about him getting a second place or first place MVP vote. Obviously, that would be great. But for Deshaun Watson and the Browns to be a Super Bowl contender, I think he needs to be top 10 level quarterback play. At worst, he needs to be at a Matt Stafford, Jared Goff level. It would be really helpful if he's playing at like a Jalen Hurts or Brock Purdy level, right? If he's like just being insanely efficient, not necessarily making a ton of plays, but just taking care of the football, making sure the team stays on the field, and all of that. And I think a better way to illustrate of what he needs to be for the Cleveland Browns, if I had to point to one of the most pivotal areas for Deshaun Watson to pay attention to statistically, it would be his performance in two spots. 3rd and 10 plus and 3rd down overall. What is the conversion percentage for Deshaun Watson in those situations? The league averages for converting a 3rd down in 10 plus is 20%, right? You have a 20% chance of converting a 3rd and plus, 10 and plus. To convert a 3rd down, you have a 39% chance. That's based off of the 2023 numbers. That's what you get if you just look at what the passer numbers are for first downs on 3rd downs. 20 and 39. So if you're the Browns, you need Deshaun Watson to be above 20 and above 39. You need to be above average in those areas, because if you can play ball control, if you can stay on the field more than most teams with the defense you have, you're going to win most games that you play in. So you want to stay above 20 on 3rd down and 10 plus, and you want to stay above 39% on 3rd downs total. Now, Deshaun Watson in his career has been somebody who has completed 22% of his 3rd and 10 yards plus conversions. He's turned 22% of 3rd and 10s and longer into first downs. He has converted 40% career of his 3rd downs. His standout year of his career, 2020, he was 23 and 45 in those categories. So extremely good in those spots. We know he didn't have a semblance of a defense in 2020, so it did not matter. Obviously, this year he will have what we hope to be a very strong defense. Now, let's look at some of the numbers since he's come to the Browns. Since he's come to the Browns, he was in 2022, 19 and 42. So above average on overall 3rd downs, but below the average on 3rd and 10 yards plus. Last year, it flipped. He was 23 and 38. He was above average on 3rd down and 10 yards plus. He was below average on 3rd down and any 3rd down situations. He was 2 percentage points below average. He needs to get up above that. Preferably for me, 22 and 40 would be good. But if you can get to those 23 and 45 numbers, that would be really good there. You just need to be above average on 3rd down. I think that'd be really pivotal for this team. And it would show me that he's more comfortable in his offense, because where I've seen Deshaun Watson have success so far as a Cleveland Browns player, when he's looked the most like himself, it's either been on deep passes or intermediate passes. It really hasn't been on short passes. The short passes are where he looks super rusty. So if he can get better at that, that would probably improve the third down overall percentage, and those numbers should be well above average. So that's what you need Deshaun Watson to be. If I told you one stat to look at that'll tell you where you can track his growth, it's that one right there. And it'll be the stat that you feel the most, right? Because we feel how a quarterback plays the most on third down. When a quarterback is consistently successful on third down, they could do whatever they want on the other two downs. But if they still move the ball on third down, we're going to talk about how good they played. But if they ball out on first and second down, but get a bunch of like missed third down opportunities, we're going to talk trash. Like the third down and fourth down, whenever it comes up, that's a little bit more rare, obviously. But third and fourth down is where our perception of quarterbacks are built. Quarterbacks that have a poor perception usually don't have the greatest performance in the most visible moments in that number. Something to think about. I wanted to do this video, and I specifically wanted to do this video now because I feel like the Cleveland Browns are in a position where they're going to be able to get away with the wide range of quarterback play if they need to. I think this team demonstrated that a lot last year, is that they were able to get away with a wide range of quarterback play. And when you have a team that can get away with a wide range of quarterback play, it makes discussing the quarterback a little bit more tricky, because is this a Jimmy Garoppolo situation where a mediocre quarterback is being propped up by an excellent defense? Or is this a situation like Ben Roethlisberger where a great quarterback is kind of being downplayed because they also have a great defense? It can go either way when you have that. So in order to avoid me personally and the people who watch me falling into that trap, I want to really get an understanding of, one, what the bar is for Deshaun Watson, right? I don't want to let these last 2 years lower the bar for Deshaun Watson. He's not old enough for me to start lowering the bar. If I don't think he's decreased athletically, if I don't think that he is degraded significantly as a football player over the last few years, then I should keep the bar at where it's at. I should not entertain lowering that bar for Deshaun Watson. So I want to make sure that that bar is set exactly where it needs to be. Also, I want to make sure I understand what will give me the best way to kind of know if he's living up to that bar. How do I measure what he feels like? How do I measure if he's playing at a level similar to a season that he had where he played a different amount of games versus in a different opponents? What makes this very intangible conversation more tangible? And that's what the hope is for these two videos, is to give me and you a better understanding of what the ceiling should be on Deshaun Watson and what we should demand that the ceiling should be on Deshaun Watson, what we can accept and still think we can get a Super Bowl quality player, right? Because you're not always going to get your ceiling. You're not always going to get the best case scenario, but that should be the best case scenario. You're still willing to accept something that's under that. And what would be unacceptable from the quarterback position. That's all I want to talk about. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.